November 26, 1944, 08:14 hours. 22,000 feet above central Germany, the air is thin enough to burn your lungs with every breath. Frost creeps along oxygen hoses. Engines thrum with a mechanical steadiness that feels almost mocking. Inside a B-17 Flying Fortress, a waist gunner glances at his wristwatch. 8 minutes. That's how long it's been since the last formation passed overhead. And already, far off to the west, another silver stream is appearing, contrails stitching white scars across the sky. The German flak crews below notice it too. They had finished firing, reloading, resetting fuses. Someone had even dared to light a cigarette. Then the sirens scream again. Another bomber group, another wall of engines, another impossible wave. By late 1944, the sky over the Reich no longer belonged to time as Germans understood it. It ran on an American schedule now, one measured in production quotas, sortie cycles, and stopwatches clipped to the belts of men who had turned war into rhythm. To the men flying that day, it felt unreal. To the men waiting below, it felt endless. You can almost hear it before you see it, the sound of hundreds of Wright Cyclone and Pratt and Whitney engines blending into a single, unbroken roar. Not rising, not falling, just constant, like the ocean. For Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Becker, commanding a flak battery outside Magdeburg, the realization comes slowly and then all at once. This is not a raid. This is a system. He has fought since Poland. He remembers the early days, British bombers at night, scattered, cautious. Then the Americans arrived, arrogant in daylight, flying in neat boxes that could be counted, predicted, ambushed. But this is different. His range crews are exhausted. Ammunition trucks are behind schedule. Replacement gunners are boys and old men now. And still the bombers keep coming, spaced so precisely that the sky never clears long enough to feel safe. 8 minutes. It is not the number itself that terrifies him. It's what the number represents. Someone planned this. Across the channel, on a frozen airfield in East Anglia, the schedule is already moving again. At RAF Bassingbourn, ground crewmen in grease-stained jackets swarm over returning B-17s as soon as their wheels stop rolling. Engines are cut. Bomb bay doors hang open like exhausted jaws. The smell of oil, cordite, and hydraulic fluid mixes with wet grass and exhaust. There is no applause, no pause. A crew chief checks his clipboard. Engine 3 needs a magneto replaced. Engine 4 is leaking oil. The ball turret jammed again. They have 4 hours. 4 hours to turn a combat-damaged heavy bomber into a machine ready to fly straight back into Germany. Nearby, another fortress is already being refueled. Fuel hoses snake across the tarmac like arteries. Bomb trailers roll in, each carrying 500-pound general-purpose bombs, olive drab and stenciled with neat white lettering. The men loading them don't talk much. They don't need to. They know the math. If they miss the slot, the formation slips. If the formation slips, the timetable breaks. And if the timetable breaks, someone over Berlin notices. This is what the Germans never fully understood. They believed air power was about aircraft, pilots, aces, tactics. The Americans turned it into logistics. Behind every bomber overhead was a system that began weeks earlier, at a factory in Seattle or San Diego, where aluminum sheets became wings. At a training base in Texas or Arizona, where boys learned to fly by instruments alone. At a supply depot where spark plugs, tires, and .50 caliber ammunition were stacked by the millions. By late 1944, the 8th Air Force was no longer improvising. It was executing. Major General Jimmy Doolittle, now commanding 8th Air Force, had made a decision months earlier that would change everything. Fighters would no longer stay glued to the bombers at all times. They would hunt. P-51 Mustangs ranged ahead and behind the formations, tearing apart what remained of the Luftwaffe. The result was devastating. Loss rates dropped, crews survived, aircraft came back. And when aircraft came back, they flew again. And again. And again. A navigator named Lieutenant Robert Hayes sits at his chart table as his bomber settles into formation altitude. He runs his finger along a thin red line drawn in grease pencil. Timing marks are scribbled in the margins. Bomb release 10:32, he mutters. The formation is early. That almost never happens. Ahead of them, another group is already peeling off, turning south after dropping its load. Hayes watches their contrails drift apart, then checks his watch again. 8 minutes. He thinks of home, of clocks ticking in kitchens, of schedules meaning nothing more than dinner or church. Here time has teeth. The Germans below can feel it too. Every factory siren, every flak report, every shattered roof arrives not randomly, but predictably. The raids are no longer surprises. They are appointments. And missing one is not an option. What makes it impossible is not the distance. It's the repetition. One raid, brave, two, determined. But 10 waves in a single morning, hundreds of bombers per hour, day after day. No air defense doctrine in the world had been built for that. German industry was optimized for precision. American war production was optimized for volume. And now, that philosophy had climbed into the sky. At some point that winter, German intelligence officers quietly changed how they wrote reports. They stopped estimating bomber numbers. They started measuring intervals. As the last bombs of the current wave fall and the ground shakes beneath Becker's flak battery, he looks west again. The smoke hasn't cleared. And already, faint but unmistakable, new contrails are forming. Another group. Another 8 minutes. He lowers his binoculars slowly, a thought forming that he does not dare speak aloud. If this pace continues, how long before there is nothing left to defend? The first bomber touches down at RAF Debden just after noon, tires screaming against wet concrete. The aircraft rolls to a stop, trailing smoke from an engine that should have failed an hour ago. Before the props even wind down, men are running. You can feel the urgency in their footsteps, boots slapping puddles, shouted numbers cutting through engine noise. A crew chief reaches the nose ladder and slaps the fuselage once, hard, as if waking a stubborn animal. Fuel leak on 2, someone yells. Flak hole port wing, rib section. No one looks surprised. This is normal now. By late 1944, American airfields across England no longer function like bases. They function like factories, only the product is airborne. Each bomber has a card. Each card has times written in pencil, erased, rewritten. Land, refuel, reload, repair, brief, launch. The rhythm is relentless. There is no room for admiration or fear, just sequence. And somewhere always, a stopwatch is running. Staff Sergeant Walter Red Morrison, crew chief of a B-24 Liberator, has slept 3 hours in the last 48. His hands are permanently black with oil no matter how hard he scrubs. He knows his aircraft by sound alone. Engine 1 still coughs at idle. Engine 4 whines when it shouldn't. He doesn't need to be told that the bomber must fly again tomorrow. He already knows. They all do. The order is never shouted. It doesn't have to be. In a nearby hangar, mechanics work beneath floodlights, welding torn aluminum skin while bomb loaders roll carts into position. A B-17 with a jagged flak hole big enough to crawl through is patched with a riveted plate and sent back into rotation. Paint doesn't matter. Symmetry doesn't matter. Only function. American ground crews have learned to think like production managers. If an engine can last one more mission, it does. If a bomber can fly without a radio, it flies. If a crew can be swapped, it is. This is not carelessness. It is scale. The Germans still imagine each bomber as an individual machine, lovingly assembled, irreplaceable. The Americans see them as units in motion. When General Carl Spaatz reviews sortie reports, he doesn't linger on heroics. He studies flow, how many aircraft launched, how many returned, how quickly they can be turned. He understands something his enemy does not. Air power is not about winning a single day. It's about denying the enemy a quiet one. At Schweinfurt, a factory foreman named Hans Keller stands amid twisted steel beams and broken glass. The machines are silent again. Power lines sag. The smell of dust and burned insulation hangs heavy. He checks his watch. The last bombs fell 20 minutes ago. He does not order the all-clear. He has learned. Instead, workers crouch in doorways, listening, counting, waiting for the next wave. They have learned the rhythm too, even if they don't understand how it's possible. When the sirens begin again, someone swears softly. 8 minutes. There is no time to repair, no time to recover, no time to hope. The factory has become a target not once, but permanently. Back in England, planners at 8th Air Force Headquarters move pins on a map with clinical precision. Target systems, not cities, ball-bearing plants, oil refineries, rail junctions. The genius and cruelty of the schedule is that it allows no recovery window. Morning raids disrupt transport, midday raids hit production, afternoon raids catch repair crews at work, night brings the RAF. It is not coincidence. It is choreography. Colonel Curtis LeMay had believed in mass and repetition long before it became reality. Now, with losses reduced and escort fighters dominating the skies, his philosophy is being executed at full power. The Germans had once waited for the bombers to come. Now they know exactly when they will arrive. That knowledge does not bring comfort. Lieutenant Hayes' bomber lands hard, brakes squealing. He climbs down the ladder, legs stiff, ears still ringing. Across the field, another formation is already taxiing out. He watches them for a moment, exhausted. "How many today?" someone asks. 3, Hayes replies. 3 full missions in a single day. A year earlier, that would have been unthinkable. Now it is expected. Crews rotate, aircraft rotate, missions stack. The air war has crossed a threshold where human endurance and mechanical endurance blur together. And yet it works. Because behind every exhausted man is another one trained and waiting. Behind every damaged aircraft is a spare part already moving down the line. This is what Germany cannot match. Not courage, not skill, but replacement. Deep inside the Reich Air Ministry, reports pile up faster than they can be read. Ammunition shortages, fuel shortages, pilot shortages, airfields cratered faster than they can be repaired. Someone circles a sentence in red pencil. Enemy bomber streams continuous. Continuous. Not heavy, not concentrated. Continuous. It is a word that does not belong in warfare. War is supposed to surge and recede, to allow regrouping, to breathe. This war does not. As dusk settles over England, engines begin to start again. Another shift, another wave, another 8-minute interval waiting to be filled. The sky darkens, but the schedule does not slow. And far away, across rivers and rail lines already broken twice today, German defenses prepare once more, knowing, with growing certainty, that tomorrow will be worse. Because this was never about a single raid. It was about proving that the clock itself had changed sides. The scramble order comes too late. At Leifheim Air Base, a Luftwaffe airfield shrouded in morning mist, engines cough and sputter as ground crews pull chocks away from Messerschmitt Bf-109s. The pilots are already running, helmets half-fastened, parachutes banging against their legs. They know what's coming. They just don't know how much. By the time the first fighters lift off, the bombers are already overhead. Not a single formation. Several. Layered, timed, relentless. The American schedule has turned interception into guesswork. Fighters climb hard, fuel gauges already ticking downward, only to find the sky crowded with contrails that stretch from horizon to horizon. Which group do you attack? Which one matters? The answer is brutal. They all do. Oberstleutnant Wilhelm Krauss grips the cockpit rail as his Bf-109 claws upward through thin cloud. He scans the sky and feels something close to panic. The Mustangs are there. Always there now. They appear not in tight escort but loose, predatory arcs, high, fast, patient. The Americans have learned. They no longer cling to the bombers like shields. They wait above, then dive. Krauss remembers when German pilots chose when to fight. That time is gone. A P-51 streaks past his canopy, silver and blue, too fast to follow. Tracers flash. Another German fighter spirals downward, trailing smoke. Fuel warnings blink. Krauss hasn't even reached the bombers yet. This is the hidden effect of the 8-minute schedule. It does not just exhaust factories and flak crews. It drains pilots. Each scramble burns fuel Germany can't replace. Each aborted interception costs engines already running past service limits. Each loss is irreplaceable. American pilots rotate out after a set number of missions. German pilots do not. They fly until they are killed, or until there is nothing left to fly. On the ground in Berlin, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring studies maps with clenched fists. He demands explanations. He demands promises. He is given numbers instead. Sortie rates falling, pilot training hours cut in half, synthetic fuel production collapsing under repeated attacks. The clock is against him now. He had once boasted that no enemy bomber would reach the capital. Now they arrive on schedule. At Merseburg, an oil refinery burns for the third time in a week. Fire crews work under the distant rumble of engines, knowing they may be bombed again before the flames are out. Oil is life in modern war. And the Americans understand this better than anyone. By late 1944, the bombing is no longer about terror or morale. It is about systems failure. Remove fuel and everything else follows. Fighters stay grounded, tanks stall, trains stop. The 8-minute intervals ensure no stockpile ever recovers. Germany is not being knocked out. It is being starved. Lieutenant Hayes' bomber crosses the coast outbound, heading home through flax-scarred cloud. He looks back one last time. Behind them, another wave is already approaching the target area. He realizes something then, something unsettling. If his aircraft turned around now, landed, refueled, and launched again, there would still be bombers over Germany when he returned. The thought makes the war feel suddenly very small and very inevitable. The Luftwaffe's final gamble comes in desperate flashes. Me-262 jet fighters screaming through formations at unheard-of speeds. For a moment, German pilots feel hope again. But jets need fuel. Jets need maintenance. Jets need time. And time is the one thing the American schedule does not allow. Runways are cratered. Fuel depots vanish. Mechanics are killed at their tools. The miracle weapon arrives into a world already measured and consumed. 8 minutes. Always 8 minutes. In a bunker outside Hamburg, an air defense officer writes in his diary, "We no longer count raids, we count minutes." It is not meant to be poetic. It is a statement of defeat. As winter deepens, German civilians begin to recognize the pattern as well. Sirens, bombs, silence, then sirens again. sometimes before the echoes have faded. Children ask when it will end. No one answers, because everyone knows now. The bombers are not coming to destroy Germany in a day. They are coming to make sure it can never rebuild a single one. High above the clouds, American bombers hold formation with mechanical precision. Watches are checked, courses corrected, bomb doors armed. The schedule continues. And somewhere far below, an entire nation is running out of minutes. January 14, 1945, 09:06 hours. Over central Germany, the sky is already crowded. B-17s from the 1st Air Division cross paths with B-24s from the 2nd, their contrails braiding into a white lattice that stretches for miles. Far below, flak bursts blossom uselessly, black puffs marking where bombers were 8 minutes ago. This is no longer an offensive. It is a calculation. Each formation is a number, each target a variable, each minute accounted for. The Reich is being reduced by arithmetic. Inside a rail yard near Halle, freight cars sit motionless on twisted tracks. Bombs fall with methodical precision, cutting lines already repaired twice this week. The workers don't even run anymore. They simply step aside and wait. They know what comes next. Another wave, another 8 minutes. German planners had once relied on elasticity, shift production, reroute trains, disperse factories. It had worked against sporadic bombing. It fails against continuity. Because every solution requires time. And time is gone. In England, the men who built the schedule rarely see its effects. They sit in heated rooms studying chalkboards covered in columns of numbers, loss rates, turnaround times, bomb tonnage. There is nothing romantic about it. That is precisely why it works. A lieutenant updates a board. On target every 7 minutes 50 seconds. No one smiles. They nod. Staff Sergeant Morrison finishes tightening a bolt and steps back, wiping his hands on a rag already black with oil. His Liberator is patched, fueled, and loaded again. The crew arrives quietly, faces pale, eyes hollow. He looks at them. "Bring her back," he says. It is not encouragement. It is instruction. Over Berlin, anti-aircraft commanders now stagger their fire, not to surprise the bombers but to conserve ammunition. Even this feels pointless. They fire because the order exists, not because they believe it will stop anything. When bombs fall on the Tempelhof rail complex yet again, a colonel turns away from the window. "There is no gap," he says softly. That is the truth of it. There is no gap in the sky anymore. American bombers now fly in whether the Germans once counted on for safety. Cloud cover, snow, icing, radar bombing fills the schedule when visibility fails. The system adapts. It always adapts. The result is a constant pressure that grinds everything beneath it. Machines, men, morale, down to dust. In a farmhouse cellar near Dresden, a woman counts explosions the way she once counted church bells. She stops at 12. Then starts again. She has learned not to assume it's over. The war on the ground begins to reflect the war in the air. German divisions stall for lack of fuel. Trains fail to arrive. Reinforcements are delayed or never come. American and Allied troops advance not because every battle is won, but because resistance grows thinner with each mile. The schedule above has reached the ground. Lieutenant Hayes completes another mission, then another. He loses track of dates. Missions blur together. What remains clear is the rhythm: briefing, flight, bombs, return. One night, lying on his bunk, he realizes something unsettling. The bombers have become weather. They are no longer an event. They are a condition. In February, intelligence intercepts reveal a change in German communications. Targets are no longer discussed in terms of importance. They are discussed in terms of survivability. How long can it function? Not how do we defend it. The answer is always the same. Not long. The 8-minute schedule does not collapse Germany with a single blow. It does something far worse. It removes the possibility of recovery. And as winter grinds on, even the most loyal defenders of the Reich begin to understand that the war is no longer about winning. It is about enduring. And endurance has a limit. Above the clouds, bomb bay doors open once more. Below, the Reich counts down what minutes it has left. April 16, 1945, 07:41 hours. The bombers are already turning back. Over a shattered Germany, the sky is strangely quiet, not empty, but tired. Contrails drift and dissolve without urgency. The schedule still exists on paper, but its purpose is fading. There is little left to hit. Lieutenant Hayes looks down through broken cloud at a landscape that no longer resembles a nation at war. Rail lines end in nothing. Factories are roofless skeletons. Roads are choked with refugees moving west, away from a front that no longer has shape. For the first time, the bomber stream thins. The clock has reached zero. On the ground, German officers stop checking watches. Sirens fail to sound, not because they are broken, but because no one bothers to repair them. Fuel trucks sit empty. Flak guns stand silent, barrels worn smooth by a war already finished. The 8-minute intervals are gone. Not because the Americans stopped, because there is nothing left that can respond. In England, ground crews still work the same way they always have. Habits are hard to break. Bombs are loaded, fuel flows, engines turn. Then an order arrives. Stand down. Men freeze, hands resting on metal that no longer needs them. Some cheer, some simply sit. Staff Sergeant Morrison leans against the nose of his liberator and realizes his hands are shaking. He doesn't know why. Fatigue, relief, something else. The schedule that ruled his life is suddenly irrelevant. In Berlin, amid ruins, a clock hangs crooked on the wall of a government building. Its hands are stopped at a random minute. No one bothers to wind it. Time has lost meaning here. Historians will later argue about what ended the war, armies, leaders, decisions. But for those who lived beneath the bombers, the answer feels simpler. The war ended when Germany ran out of minutes. The impossible American schedule was never about speed for its own sake. It was about inevitability, about removing hope one interval at a time. 8 minutes. That was all it took between despair and the next wave. Between rebuilding and destruction. Between belief and certainty. Lieutenant Hayes lands for the last time and climbs down into quiet. No engine starting nearby. No rush. Just wind over grass and distant voices. He checks his watch out of habit. It no longer matters. The sky over Europe clears. The clock stops. And the war, measured so precisely for so long, finally ends. And